This meeting is being recorded.
Hi everyone, we're just waiting on a few more to join us. I'll try and keep an eye on those who are joining us as they arrive. Lovely to see you all. Got a lovely bunch joining from all around the world. I was just explaining to our panelists. Truly global gang today. Okay. So hopefully you can all see that we're recording. I will. Right, there we go. I've muted everybody, and as our panelists join us, I will. I'll ask you all to unmute yourselves. So all our panelists should be able to unmute yourselves. So we're just allowing a few more to arrive. Really lovely gang of people today. There we go. Right, we've got a really good group of people who've joined us already. So I think what I'll do is just get started with a quick introduction. I was just saying we've got guests from all over the world. We've got people from Hong Kong and Australia, Auckland. It's a little bit early for the Americas, but we're recording and we'll share the video with everybody in our community afterwards. We'll also send the link to the video to everyone who registered for this event, along with the details of our work, including the table of categories and indicators and our charter of total food impacts. We've got a great group of guests, as I said, from the government, policy, business, academic science, and multilateral worlds. We'll have guests from the World Benchmarking Alliance, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, World Food Programme, other UN agencies, including the Food and Agriculture Organization. We've got Sainsbury's, Lidl, the UK's Food Standards Agency, the Department for the Environment, Food and Agriculture, and DEFRA. We've got, I'm just keeping an eye on people as they join. 100 of you have registered, so we'll see how many of you actually managed to join us. So just by quick way of introduction, our global community is dismantling poor diets, environmental damage, and social disadvantage through a harmonized framework for measuring the impacts of agriculture and food. Our community is made up of scientists, LCA practitioners, data engineers, business operatives, farmers, market managers, investors, policy think tanks, policy staff, campaigners. Uniquely, our framework reflects a full system or 360-degree view, completely free of vested interests. Having devised our first version of a framework, we're now looking to industry to choose some of those indicators to start adopting, to begin assimilating credible science-backed sustainability into operations. We collaborate with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, World Benchmarking Alliance, Access to Nutrition Initiative, GAIN, World Farmers Markets Coalition, many others, the Sustainable Food Trust, and we belong to the EAT Foundation-led Food Forward Consortium. We measure sustainability across 5 categories, one of which is food safety. The others are environmental impact, nutrition, labor rights, and land sovereignty. What's emerged from our community is a certainty that food safety regulation and risk management is potentially the most direct route into capturing broader sustainability impacts. We'll be hearing from some brilliant specialists from within the community on this subject. If we leave you with just one message today, it's that our community is made up of specialists working within the existing system who understand firsthand all the obstacles to delivering credible sustainability. If you're already involved in certification and measurements, and there are many of you from the certification world here today, again, we'd ask you to consider expanding your indicators to incorporate some of the wider impacts we consider vital to sustainability. We absolutely implore the business world to put us to work on your behalf to help you navigate toward genuine sustainability. I'm just going to make sure we don't have any more participants we need to allow in. Here we go. I'm preaching to the choir here, but let's remind ourselves that the food system is the biggest killer in the world, as 30,000 a day die from hunger and from malnutrition. Our food supply chains are plagued by child labour. Agri-food accounts for 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's responsible for 90% of deforestation. With all this in mind, we've got high hopes for the Food Data Transparency Partnership, which was announced in the UK in June. We believe it will lead to the first government-mandated infrastructure, allowing multi-criteria data to be collected, providing consumers with credible information about animal welfare, nutrition, and environmental impacts. We're delighted that Julie Pierce from the Food Standards Agency, who's behind this initiative, is with us today. So what I'm going to do is bring Julie in first. Julie, you should be able to switch yourself on.
I think I've done that. Hello,
Great.
everyone.
Brilliant. Handing over to you now.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, my name is Julie Pierce. I'm from the Food Standards Agency, and within my portfolio, I'm responsible for all things to do with data, information, insights, analytics, and our scientific research. So it's a broad portfolio, but I think the Food Data Transparency Programme sits well within it. And thank you for the introduction, and it's great to be here today talking to such a sort of fantastic audience with maybe single interest, but many different backgrounds. And yes, the FSA is one of the UK government bodies involved with the Food Data Transparency Partnership. So we are just one with DEFRA and colleagues in Department for Health and Social Care. I think we do, and I shall start to use its acronym FDTP because it's just easier, but I think it's also worth everybody just looking at what that means. Food Data Transparency Partnership, and all of those words are key here. So we can maybe unpack a little bit of all of that later on. But just very briefly, yes, it's an initiative that was announced back in June, and we've been working on it within the government teams and starting to reach out to others who need to be very much involved with the delivery of this partnership. So that work is going on, and I hope the colleagues in DEFRA and DHSC will be able to join us to make more in the way of actual announcements rather than this, which is more of an informal update for everybody. Just stepping back a little bit, maybe to reinforce, I think that we are all broadly on the same page, but reassurance that those of us in government are seeing increasingly the value of data for individual businesses, but their supply chains, consumers, and in fact the whole system. That's where we sit, looking across the whole of the food system, whether it's for the UK and also increasingly spending time thinking about the global food system. And as we see those opportunities to use that data for lots of different purposes, that in itself we recognise is potentially a burden on industry to have so many different asks, whether from different governments, different parts of government, different parts of the commercial sector. So the challenge has been, well, why can't we do just some of that once? And why can't we sort of reuse all of that? And to do it once, to save us all time, money and resources, but to do it all once and ensure that what we do is then consistent, it makes sense, everybody can have the same takeaways from what they're looking at. Also, that consistency and transparency, I think, is really important for consumers. We do a lot of work understanding what consumers' views are about the food they eat, the food system, and also ourselves as the regulator, and consistently seeing that need for that trust, the importance of transparency across the whole of the food system. But also have been listening more to investors saying they would like to invest in the right sustainable businesses, and using the broadest sense of the word sustainable. They want to make the right investments, but how do they get the right solid, accurate, trusted data about the businesses they're being asked to invest in? So how to avoid greenwashing. And then us who make the policy, again, we need to know what we're looking at as we look across the whole of the food system, understanding what is going on, understanding where we may need to make interventions and changes. But I think any of us who've been looking at the way these systems work and the complexity, we're becoming increasingly mindful that we need to be careful of unintended consequences. So again, how do we get that data to understand what might happen if we implemented this new piece of policy? So there are a whole range of benefits that we're looking to get from the FDTP. And those are just some illustrations, but it's not a single benefit for one single audience or one single part of the community. So, as I said, we're looking to see how we do all of that. We've got 3 what I might call domains or areas that the FDTP is looking at. And I'll come back to there may be others, but we'll start off with these 3 because they're big enough on their own. They are the environment, health, and animal welfare. So we've got those 3 domains, and also there is a 4th work stream that relates to what I'm calling data infrastructure. So this is where we may try to do things once, collect data once where we can, transport that data, analyze the data, have a single set of data standards, maybe a single set of APIs or an agreed single approach to data governance and data sharing. Some of all of that sort of stuff is absolutely critical, but can be quite time consuming and difficult to deliver on. But again, I think there are opportunities there to do it only once. So we've started working already and creating the 4 work streams, one for each of the domains, being led by DEFRA and the HSC. And the FSA is leading on the data and tech infrastructure. Now, just to manage expectations, I'm not planning to go and build a big thing. So that is not my intention, but I'm coming at this, and I'll be really interested to hear what others think today. I'm coming at this very much from a set of principles around standards, interoperability, reusing what we've already got, because I think that has been one of our observations for us in government. And you may say, well, we already knew that, but there's a huge amount that is already out there. There are different sorts of standards, particularly in the sustainability area. There are a number of standards. There's a lot that's being done. The challenge there may be can you have more than one sort of system working at the same time? Does that make sense? Does that achieve the goals of consistency and transparency and trust? So it's a challenge. I think it's a complex challenge, but I'm very mindful of the opportunity that we've got of all of the work and the achievements that business primarily have been making, with the NGOs have been making over the last few years. Government, we see this as really important to the food system as a whole. I think what I want to do, maybe you might say we're a little bit late to the party, but what I want to do is to really understand what is it that's needed from government. What is it that only we can do because we are government and we can create legislation, or we can enforce regulation, we can convene, we can create standards, but equally if we're not needed, then we don't need to step in where we aren't needed. So I'm very keen to understand what it is you need from us in government. Then, as I said, the FSA, we are taking responsibility and leading on the infrastructure, this data infrastructure. For this part of the FDTP, we don't own any one of those domains that are owned by other government departments. But having said that, we remain, as the FSA, responsible for the safety of our food, the authenticity of the food that we're eating. We are seeing the value of data again through the whole of the food system as it relates to food safety and authenticity. Also very mindful of our role and the priority we put on allergen information, as well as getting involved with some of the global initiatives around, for example, traceability, where we're working with Codex and FDA on traceability. So those are areas that we continue to prioritize. We're not deprioritizing those in case people were concerned, but we want to do that as well in parallel with what we're doing with FDTP. So really keen to hear the discussion today and to feed in your thoughts into our early considerations, and also looking for volunteers to get involved and to share experiences or to help contribute to the design of pilots. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that quick introduction. There's so much to know, and there are such high hopes for what this data collection process is going to enable. I won't speak on behalf of others on the call, but you know, the synthesized approach from OmniAction community members is really that regulation has a very, very important role to play in creating a level playing field. It's really hard. A lot of businesses, for example, are already being measured around their sustainability from publicly disclosed documents by, for example, the World Benchmarking Alliance. But with a lack of regulation actually stating what it is that companies should be working to and what documents they should be disclosing, it means that it's quite patchy. So I'm sure we'll get to that soon. But what's, I think, incredibly interesting to the community is the fact that you've come from a food safety place in terms of the Food Standards Agency, and that your, you know, primary customers actually are we consumers. Which is a little bit different to, you know, the audiences who DEFRA has to be concerned about, for example. And that's a really, really interesting position to be in, as we as a community have really got to grips with the, I think until recently, very overlooked role that food safety can play in improving sustainability standards in a broader context, and the relationship that sustainability plays with, to food safety. But enough from me, let's crack on, and I will introduce Tarryn Gorre from Kafoodle. Tarryn, take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me today. So I also don't have slides. I will share a slide with my contact details on. But I think following on from what Judy so articulately said, is I'm coming from industry. So I feel like I'm on the panel as kind of a live case study of what it's been like. So just as a bit of background, I've been in the food industry for about 20 years. I run a company called Kafoodle, which for those of you that don't know is a food safety compliance technology that works within industry. So we work around food allergens, nutrition, carbon calculations, and mainly in the education, healthcare, and casual dining or hospitality sector, as most of you will know it. And one of the things I was going to talk about today as a live type of case study is how excited, firstly, I am about the FDTP program and OmniAction and food standards for getting involved and making it happen. But I think for me, there's the real importance of food safety and what that means towards everything else that comes on from it. So we've been going for 8 years, and around that, our key priority is food safety and the communication of allergens in line with the 2014 legislation. So for those of you who aren't in the EU, legislation around reporting on 14 main allergens came out, but 35 to 50 countries globally have some sort of allergen legislation to keep people safe. And I think one of the biggest issues we've had that'll be good to see change is the transparency of food information. And as Judy mentioned, the consistency of food information. So I think we obviously represent, today I'm talking mainly from my client's angle, which would be a care home, a restaurant group, and quite large. We have clients that have over 100 care homes or 50 hospitals or 50 pubs. And I think, as Judy was saying about the consumer's right to food information, we couldn't agree more with it. But I think what has been a real problem for industry so far is the collection of that data. So I'm sure, as most of you are preaching to the choir, as Lee said, is collecting the basic allergen information, collecting may contain information, how to show may contain information. All of that has been quite a minefield over the last 8 years. And, all of that data is given to restaurants and care homes in very different formats. The amount of times I'll get a photo of a box saying, this is our allergen information, or trying to type up a Tesco's or some sort of retailer's stuff off their website to help clients who've had to last minute pop into a shop because their deliveries didn't arrive. So for me, there is a really, really big food safety problem at the moment when it comes to supply chain. We are all aware of the supply chain issues, and it means that people are buying food from other distributors, manufacturers, or businesses that they wouldn't normally buy from, and therefore aren't always getting the correct and up-to-date information. So I think
I'm just going to put everyone on mute, and then I'll let you jump in again, Tarryn. You might have to unmute yourself. Yeah, there we go. Go.
Thank you. So I think for me, there's a big element of how we can use the carrot of traceability, but actually the stick for me is still very much food safety. So I think if we can get allergen information and food safety 100% live and right, and as Judy mentioned about the API and the one consistent master set of data that is then drawn down, I think for me the biggest concern is making sure, as I'm sure for a lot of you, is that all of that information is kept up to date. And I think, speaking from industry, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the amount of recalls that happen, and they communicated on Twitter, and these are really, really big.
Yeah. Sorry, there we go. Tarryn, sorry, you're on.
Okay. There are really big manufacturers who have to recall products. There are retailers that have to recall products. And that has an ongoing effect on smaller businesses such as restaurants and pubs, yet consumers expect so much more from them. As in, if you go into a restaurant and they're unsure of their allergen legislation, that's just not acceptable. But I think what I really want to iterate today is there is not one of my clients that doesn't want to communicate their food information better to consumers. Just right now, it is a really hard slog to get the correct food information. And I mean, we're 8 years down into machine learning and artificial intelligence and mapping to full data gaps because we don't get the correct information. And we've got to go back and challenge people when they say that almond milk contains dairy. And I think it is really a really big struggle, and I'm excited to know that now with the sustainability and how we can have to report on that, how that will naturally have an effect on food safety and what that means for kind of smaller businesses as we move forward. And the biggest thing for me, as I said to Lise, was I think it's got to be affordable. This morning I've seen there's a free carbon calculator tool that has come out for all catering businesses. That's fantastic. I think it's really exciting. And I think having a data set of products that is accurate, that has full allergen and nutritional information, that is updated and then is live fed through to businesses or through their technologies such as Kafoodle into these businesses so that information is kept completely up to date is really, really vital. I also think the standardization piece, we're not carbon experts. It's something we put into our system, but I was quite surprised the more I read into it, is there all of these carbon calculation tools out there at the moment, but actually none of them calculate the carbon in the same way. So you can run your recipe through one system and you can be an A rating, you run it through another system and it's a B rating. And I think that I was just quite shocked at how misleading that must be for consumers. And obviously with carbon calculations, there's a bit of room for error, but in the industry I work in, which is allergens, there really is zero room for error. So I think the more we work together, and then I'm much better at answering questions. So I think I will leave my preach there for now.
Well, listen, Tarryn, thank you so much. And also I get the sense that, you, along with everybody within our community, are really happy to pour the tech that you've already developed, that you're already applying into any solution that could support what Julie's up to. Sorry, I'm just going to mute again. So that I think that that's probably a really key takeaway, I think, for all policymakers, that those in industry who are already involved in this world have some great tools that they're really, really happy to share, really happy to see more widely adopted, and just really, really looking out for the regulation to create a level playing field for everybody. And further to that, we will now introduce Bill. Bill, is it very, very late in Australia where you are? Bill, you'll have to unmute yourself.
It is, it's only 7:30 in the evening, Lise. We're okay, we're doing okay.
Right. Yeah.
I am going to share my screen and see if it works. Just tell me if you're looking at something or not.
Yeah.
Just let it come up. I need to just swap that over, don't I? How do I do that?
You could press the presentation, but if you're happy to just whiz through with
okay, I'll just run it like this anyway. So good morning, everybody. My name is Bill McBride, as Lise has indicated. I've just been sitting back here fascinated by the discussion. It's good to hear what is happening over in your part of the world. My background is the food manufacturing industry, and in particular, food safety certification, commercial food safety certification across the food supply chain. And as Lise has indicated, I'm talking to you from Sydney, Australia. Recently, I've teamed up with Sarah Blanchard, and who's on this call as well, and Jane Rodway from Prof Consulting Group, and of course with Lise, to investigate the integration of food safety and sustainability objectives and management across the food supply chain through the lens of the food manufacturing sector. Commercial food safety management certification started in the 90s and has become well established and embedded into the fabric of all food businesses right through the supply chain. Some of it more successful than others, but nevertheless, it's there, it's embedded. It's got a history, a risk assessment and management approach applied across the businesses and back through the supply chain. Then came, if you can see the slide here, then came sustainability. Without any clear, really agreed definition or metrics to measure improvement. The term became and still is fashionable and overused, which unfortunately allows some businesses to fit into their own requirements, which obviously leads to greenwashing. For some, sustainability is social equity. For some, it's environmental. For some, it is climate change. For some, it's about recycling or reducing food waste. But cherry picking allows businesses to ignore the aspects of sustainability that may for them be too hard, too long term, or too expensive to fix.
Bill, you're
And
still
the
on
link,
slide. I'm not sure if you wanted to be on a second or third.
that's okay, I'm right, I'm on this one.
Great.
And the link with food safety is not always evident. The industry deals with and promotes, this is the industry, not regulators, but the industry deals with, promotes, and works on food safety, security, and sustainability individually when integration is required. We have, what I call a fortress food safety mentality in commercial food safety systems. Of course, food safety is a priority, but food security to meet a burgeoning population and sustainability as per the UN SDGs are just as urgent and important as food safety, yet we work on them as standalone. So the food supply chain needs a holistic approach and agreed comprehensive metrics that measure the food safety, sustainability, and social responsibility performance of the business. And the motivation and the urgency and the need for that needs to come from within the industry itself. OmniAction recognizes that need and is building the framework, has built the framework of clear definitions and credible scientifically based metrics that Lise has described before. OmniAction recognizes the potential of building on the platform already established by food safety systems, the risk assessment methodologies, the risk management, the supply chain influence, data capture, regulatory compliance. I take Tarryn's point before that it's not all perfect. There's still a need for transparency of data. That's always unfortunately going to happen, but it's there. The framework, the foundation is there. And within that framework, food manufacturers can establish their own business ESG metrics that measure their performance horizontally across the business and vertically back through the supply chain. But again, they've got to have the motivation and the incentive and the urgency and the need to do that. And some of that is coming from the marketplace. A rigorous business governance process ties together the various priorities and addresses the any competing challenges. For the food supply chain, a universal, credible, holistic, agreed approach to sustainability is needed with metrics to match. One that integrates sustainability, food safety, and social responsibility with other business priorities and gives an equal rating. One that measures what businesses are doing well and areas they need to improve. One that incorporates existing systems and standards. And really, there's no reason why you can't integrate the GFSI schemes, the ISO 22000, ISO 14000 environmental standards, SA 8000, with other measures to integrate the three together. In the 2020s, safe food is sustainable food is safe food. You can't separate the two, and you can't deal with them individually. Yes, there are challenges, but there is an opportunity to build on the infrastructure established for food safety management to integrate sustainability, social responsibility, and food security performance measures. Having said that, I'm going to hand over to Sarah, just to who will illustrate some of this with some practical applications. Thank you, Lise.
Thanks, Bill.
Whoa, what a,
If I can,
follow.
if I can, I need to unshare my screen though, don't I?
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Wait a minute, how do I do that? I'm used to Teams.
Sorry. Bill, would you like to maybe jump off the call and come back in? Oh, there we are. There's something else has just happened now.
Stop and share. There you go.
There we
There you
are.
go. That should work for you.
Great. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. Okay.
Hi.
Now the heat is on.
Introduction, sorry, as we skip through our panel.
Sorry. What did you say, Lise?
Quick self-introduction, Sarah, please.
Oh, a quick self-introduction. Absolutely. Could I just get my screen on so I don't sort of stress myself while I'm doing that? Just 1 second. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, and I will get the PowerPoint because then I will introduce while I'm speaking here. Can you see those slides with the 4 pictures?
Yeah, there we can.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm sort of smiling because I've seen so many familiar names on this call dialing in, which is really great. And it just shows that huge interest between linking food safety and the other sustainability aspects. So really, congratulations on getting all this interest, Lisa. So an introduction for the crowd that doesn't know me, I'm Sarah Blanchard, and I'm a consultant with a few hats on, but mainly I help organizations to integrate sustainability into their business models. I'm head of ESG for Prof Consulting Group, a food and grocery consultancy. I'm an advisor for Supply Pilot, a supplier collaboration company, and consultant for International Finance Corporation. So I have quite a different sector view across the topic. My background is in food quality and sustainability. And I believe there are opportunities for people in these areas to work together and speed up progress towards the SDGs and beyond. So in the introduction, you asked us to think about greenwashing, and one moment particularly sticks with me. And this has been asked to approve copy for the launch of a plant-based product. This was some years ago. It was making sustainability claims which weren't fully substantiated, but they weren't necessarily wrong, according to legislation at the time. And it was incredibly frustrating not to have the data to fall back on. And I would have loved to have had an OmniAction framework to guide me back then. So coming to today's topic, and I'm really happy to follow on from Bill, who, as you can see, has been actively working on ways to help companies work across the food safety and sustainability silos. I'm going to talk today. I've just got 2 slides and they focus around these pictures here. So food safety practitioners have a crucial role in advancing sustainability, and people working in quality or food safety have been working with sustainability without really putting the name on it. They're already working in systems with data, and they're a brilliant source of knowledge and discipline that can be harnessed. I'm going to illustrate it with some operational examples, and this is one day at a produce farm in Vietnam. And I often use it to illustrate the linkages between food safety, people, and environmental sustainability. So the first picture at the top left there is a woman harvesting cabbages. So it's hot, she needs to drink regularly. Toilet is in the background, it's close by. It drains properly and has a hand wash which satisfies food safety requirements. The toilet's also lockable and private, and that means the woman can keep drinking to hydrate herself, knowing she can use the toilet when she needs to, and she will be safe. And also the produce then is not going to be contaminated. In picture 2, the field next to the one being harvested is being treated with pesticides. The man isn't wearing protective equipment like mask or gloves, and the pesticide dosage is just random. The good part is the plants are watered using drip irrigation, which is a good thing to minimize the amount of water used. And of course, water from a clean source, which is expected from the food safety perspective, makes the plants grow healthy and prevent stress. If we go to picture 3, so bottom right there, this is the cabbage field at the end of the day when it's harvested, and the remains are left for the farm's goats or cows to eat, and they leave dung which fertilizes the ground. But the next planting needs to be carefully controlled to make sure the dung has enough time to rot down. Otherwise, there's a risk of, for example, E. coli take up into the plants. And these are careful considerations that need to be taken with that food safety, environmental sustainability perspective, and crossing those disciplines there and making sure there's no unintended consequences of either decisions. One thing I want to point out is that you can see the buyer next to the farmer, and this is where it's really important. This is a long-term partnership which works in favor of both the wholesaler that's buying the stuff and the farming community. The wholesaler's customers trust it to sell safe, fresh food, and the farmer has a sustained income and several livelihoods. In picture 4, finally, this is at the same place, the same farm. It's a check of the food safety management system. And I've left it in there to illustrate that a system already exists and data is being recorded. Maybe not everything that we need right now, but it is operational. And this was taken several years ago, so I'm sure things have advanced since then. Okay, just going to skip on to the next slide. Here is it's a more graphical representation of what I've talked about. I'm sorry about the polka dots, but it just shows the food safety, environment, and social connections. I've kept in the blue dots because they relate to food loss and waste. And the red dots are the food safety critical control points, some of which have a crossover into environmental and human sustainability. And the food safety people all on this call will know very, very well all about CCPs. I don't need to go into them there. But what I want to illustrate, if you again look up the top left, you've got food safety in the yellow that presses that button of having the toilet. You've got environment in the green, and you've got people in beige. So you've got so many touch points where you're looking after food safety that it comes into the other elements of sustainability as well. So what I want to stress is that food safety and sustainability practitioners can work together to balance food safety, human and environmental practices, ensuring there are no unintended consequences, and share data using similar management systems. And in some places it's already happening. It's just not being talked about in terms that everybody understands. And I think it's a great opportunity to accelerate sustainability by engaging through and with food safety. So I hope this brief overview has given you an insight into holistic sustainability, the important link to food safety, and what it looks like in operation and some of the opportunities. So I think that's my 5 minutes right up.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. And again, you know, what you've so beautifully demonstrated here is really it's the efficiencies that we keep coming across, we keep uncovering, that actually collecting the right data once across a multi-criteria approach to data collection is actually just a really efficient way of making sure that the right data is then being shared across operations, and then we would say hopefully finding its way into the marketing department and labeling schemes so that consumers can benefit from that information as well. And again, you know, across the work that we've done to date, we're just seeing absolutely no resistance to the ability to really, really efficiently just open up the sets of criteria that are being, you know, in terms of the approach to data collection that could happen within existing structures. So let's go next to Rick Sanderson.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks, Lise. Great to join you all today. Out of respect for the timings, the tight timings we've got, I've also got 68 slides to show you all, so hopefully that'll all work okay. Can you all see my screen all right? And
We can.
Great stuff. So by way of quick introduction, I won't read it. I'm a food industry lifer, like most of the people on the call. I've been 27 years across the food industry here in the UK, half of which was in sort of senior procurement roles for big food companies. So Mitchells and Butlers, our biggest restaurant chain, and some of our big sort of primary producers, meat companies, etc. And I had pretty much an epiphany in my mid-30s and thought, this is crazy. I love this industry, and I cannot find out enough about where stuff comes from, how it's produced, what the compliance is. And to Tarryn's point, when the hell do things change, and why doesn't anybody tell me? So I set about tackling that through sort of a bit of consulting and then building technology platforms. So that's kind of what I found myself doing for good and bad for the last 10 years. And in doing so, I would say, on topic of today's discussion, the need for the kind of things I've been doing has morphed from technical compliance and understanding that in deep domain and deep supply chains, much more into this world of responsible sourcing and sustainability. This week, carbon, scope 3, next week, biodiversity, you name it. These are all the things that are really important now. Outside of that, I'm really proud to be part of what OmniAction is doing. I'm a proud fellow of the IFST, Sustainable Procurement Ambassador, lots of other stuff, got 4 kids, and I'm now proud to say I'm a Man United fan, which I can't say for the last few years. So anyway, without further ado, what inspired me really to start our business, which is Star Index, that's the other thing I haven't introduced, which I'll tell you a bit more about. It's a data-driven platform that really sort of taps into a lot of the headline goals that OmniAction is trying to achieve, which is how Lise and I have connected, I guess. I had a meeting 7-8 years ago with one of the retailers on the call, actually, and they said to me, look, you know, and you can see it on the screen there, that food safety is absolutely paramount, and it's why we exist. It keeps me in a job, and I can lose it very quickly if I get it wrong. However, when I'm asked around my business about stuff that's going on with suppliers and supply chains and commodities, I struggle. I've got no common language, no frameworks. I can't offer data. I've no dashboards. What are our risks? What are opportunities? And I don't like it. And so I went back on the train that day thinking, if she's got that problem, I know they all have. However, her point was she's invested in what she called point solutions right across the business. And a lot of us are on the call today doing, and we're all sort of one of those. Audits, assessors, we've got GFSI frameworks, and this is all food technical in the main, obviously, but there's always all this stuff that she'd got this investment in. But what she said, and what stuck with me really, is I don't have a single view of risk, both of my suppliers and of my raw materials, and I don't like it. And so that's kind of what I set about trying to do really, and partnering with Quadex Group, who I work with now with this, just to say, right, how can we therefore move the dial on this? How could we, for people like her and other people, wherever they sit around the industry, across food and drink, and these days we're doing stuff outside of food, is how do we deliver that? Now the good news is, and on topic, the rules of business, I'm afraid, have changed. And one of those biggest risks now is greenwashing. We're seeing it, you know, in my experience, why do people do things? Why are they motivated to do things? There's either a legal imperative, there's a financial incentive, or there's a contractual obligation. And the only other thing outside of that really is if there's an event, a cataclysmic event, and some of them are on the screen there. But crucially, to get ahead of all of these things, without visibility, there's no accountability. And I'm going to be controversial and say that we've disregarded the visibility element of that for a lot of years. And I've been a thorn in the side of a lot of my employers trying to drive that, I would say, and continue to be so. On a more positive note, the good news is today's consumers do want to do businesses with companies that care and companies with purpose. And that's manifesting in all sorts of different ways across ESG, as we now know it, from, people's attitudes to what they're prepared to pay for and pay a premium for, the emergence of standards like B Corp and the growth in that. And then obviously on the right-hand side, for all the fat cats in the room, capitalists, even if you don't care about the planet, do you know what? It's good, because being a better business is better for business, and actually is showing from a stock management point of view and from an ESG investing point of view, there's greater yields. So why don't we just get on with this and make it more prominent, which I think is happening, thankfully, but it's not without its challenges. So if you sit today, I suppose, in most boardrooms up and down the food industry, wherever we are in the world, I know these are the kind of things that we're all asking ourselves. So do we understand what these blooming sustainable development goals are? What are these NGOs saying about us? Quick check Google. What's this modern slavery legislation stuff, and what we're doing about it? Aren't we certified anyway? Don't we do that certificate thing? Are we covered? Because we do that. Do we really know who's in our supply chain? Really? I mean, honestly, I know the pack says our farmers this, and we're proud of that, but do we really know? Are we buying these raw materials sustainably? I don't know. I've got this scheme. And latest one, obviously, is do we know what our carbon impact is, and is it reducing? I mean, how the hell do people even know what their scope 3 is, let alone know how, if they don't know their supply chains? God only knows. But anyway, we're all playing that game at the moment. So that's all the questions we're asking ourselves in our own businesses. But crucially, what are our suppliers doing about all this? So if we've not got the answers to all these questions ourselves yet in our own businesses, how on earth are we going to get a measure of how our suppliers are doing it? Back to the retail brand director's point. So traditionally, I guess our view of that has been around trust and surveillance. So we set out codes of practice and all this stuff as food companies and go, right, job done, that's it, because it says in that Bible that we're not going to do this. The analogy I always give is the highway code. Of course, we all say every year we're not going to speed in our cars and we're not going to go through red lights and all that stuff. Seems to me there's quite an industry built around people who don't do that and go to training courses and get points. So let's accept that that's not the case. So the questions I guess I've asked myself in the past in some of the roles I've done in industry is, have I chosen the right suppliers for the right reasons? Increasingly these days, because of the aftershocks of the last couple of years, are they resilient? Do they add value? And are they offering us the best cost? Crucially, are they protecting my business? Have they got my interests at heart? And, you know, from a food safety point of view, of course, are they safe and legal? I mean, it should be a given. And are they upholding the values that sit in our code of practice? So what do we have in terms of trust and surveillance to get that assurance? Well, historically, yeah, we've got this little tick list of certification accreditation, we have codes of practice, as best as we can, some robust supplier approval, yeah, elements around traceability and transparency, however difficult that is, and safe and legal standards and audit. Okay, so they're all things that we rely on and that produce comfort blankets for us in terms of data, assurance, certificates, scouts badges, whatever we want to say, that's the stuff we're relying on. And that should be and is a good pool of data and resource. We all know, if we're honest, it's incredibly difficult to get that from your tier one supplier, let alone anywhere beyond. And I've been in this business years trying to do it. I can tell you it's hard, but it's not impossible. So what's the opportunity with movements like OmniAction, the things that we're doing? Well, what we're all after and what our retail brand director was after was this data-driven view of the wider scope. So rather than just in isolation looking at these things, while an auditor is at a factory, while an agronomist is going to a farmer, let's be clever and let's use what we've already got at our disposal to produce this and say, right, where the risk really lies beneath the iceberg right now, and the stuff that's exercising most MDs, CEOs and investors is this stuff around the outside. So from a sustainability point of view, what are these commitments that we made to sustainable development goals and our suppliers? Are they doing anything about it? Are they using renewable energy? What disclosures are being made? Are they working with NGOs? From an assets and environment point of view, you know, what is the issue with water use? We've talked about carbon stewardship of the land. What are these businesses actually doing about these things? And from a responsible sourcing point of view, obviously emerging legislation all around the world, human rights, modern slavery, child labour, you know, all these things that are absolutely keeping businesses awake. And if we're honest, we've disregarded for a lot of time. As I mentioned earlier, we've been predominantly doing this in the food industry for a lot of years. Now, interestingly, since COVID, the majority of our clients are now coming from outside of food, in textiles and clothing, in automotive, in the sports sector. And what's interesting is in food and drink, and you'll all recognize this, we're quite self-deprecating. We think we do a bad job of stuff and we can be quite hard on ourselves at times. I can tell you that when I demonstrate what we're doing in food to a lot of these sectors, they are amazed. They cannot believe what we're doing. And some of the sort of values and structures and contracts and conventions that underpin what we do, they're really amazed by. So I think we've got a lot we can be proud of. I think what this demonstrates to us is the information is out there to be gathered and there's smart ways of doing it. But like I said, it's difficult, it's challenging. So this is the kind of stuff that we're gathering at company level, you know, so the supplier approval stuff I've done as a buyer in the past, of course, is all that stuff I showed you on the previous slide. Are we picking the right suppliers for the right reasons? And increasingly now, are they doing all this OmniAction type stuff? And what can I get? Now, others on the call, Tarryn, others are obviously now working at product level. And again, I would say this is something we've very much disregarded over the years. It's all well and good having the great suppliers. What about the products? What about the raw materials? Where are they truly coming from? Have we got enough comfort we know about the chain of custody? And so a lot of the stuff I find myself doing these days is working with big businesses, big and small, food and drink and not, is helping them understand this, break it down by category, by commodity. What do we know the risks are? What's out there in verification across sustainability, technical, agriculture and responsible sourcing, what schemes, audits, surveillance, IoT, tech platforms, you name it, is out there that can give us these comfort factors in terms of surveillance and assurance. What can we tap into and put in one single place? And so I think a lot of the stuff that Julie talked about right at the start there is that the good news is businesses like ours and others are already doing this kind of stuff and have got frameworks where we're trying to deliver it. So getting great data and business intelligence, I can tell you, is hard work. You've got to be passionate about it. It's a labor of love, but it's not impossible. However, I would say sustainability and ESG is much more nuanced and far less binary. So as you all know, in the technical world, it's present or it's not, it's a 0 or a 1, largely. And And there's an evidence trail, a closeout, an action plan, and remediation. From a there's IoT in action. And from a sustainability perspective,
we're going to
more.
run out of time really quickly as well. So
This is my last slide. I'm done.
Brilliant. Sorry, I've cut you off. I'm really sorry, but that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I will go straight on to Graham. Graham is our academic and specialist in life cycle assessments. And Graham, what have businesses been doing wrong in terms of genuine life cycle assessments in your experience? Also, Graham, just as you're getting prepared to join us and start presenting, I'm really hoping everyone, I do apologize, we are running over, and I do hope as many of you as possible can stay with us, and we'll answer as many questions as possible at the end. So Graham is our last presenter. Rick, again, sorry about having to cut you off there, but that was just really fabulous to see what you're doing in a really hands-on fashion there. So
no problem, Lise. That's very wise to cut me off.
No.
Thanks, Lise. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Graham.
Okay, good. And can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so just a brief background on my academic journey. I started working in environmental science about 12 years ago and started working on life cycle thinking and then life cycle assessment and applying it to different food systems and commodities. And I think the theme of today's talk has very much been what drove me into where I am today, which is the team leader of the life cycle assessment group at Rothamsted Research. And I would say the theme is greenwashing. And, as I kind of developed and learned more about the life cycle assessment methodology, I realized that, first of all, every model that you create is wrong. You can do comparative models that are very useful. You can do single models, you can account for uncertainties, but essentially they're all wrong. And, people can, cherry picking was mentioned earlier, and that's a huge problem in life cycle assessment. So to answer your question in a very short way, Lise, I would say what companies are doing in some cases, not all cases, some companies are absolutely excellent, but cherry picking is a huge issue in life cycle assessment. So they will pick, say, oh, water quality. Yeah, we're really good at water quality, so we'll ignore climate change, or vice versa. So from a scientific point of view, transparency is the biggest issue with life cycle assessment. You need to report all of your assumptions, subjective assumptions. All models require subjective assumptions. You need to report them, and more importantly, you need to test them and then report the results of your tests. So I had to really quickly trim down my slides to get through quite quickly, but I'm going to just give you a really quick overview of some of the methodological developments we've done to environmental life cycle assessment. I'm going to talk a little bit about nutritional life cycle assessment, which is a really burgeoning field in the broader LCA kind of framework. How do we apply life cycle assessment at the agricultural or farm level? And then future work and ambitions for our LCA team at Northwick, which of course include working more with industry. So what given that we're funded by the taxpayer in the UK, we need, we're not funded by levies from farmers or consumers or anything. We have to think about how we can benefit society as a whole. So we need to think about where do we invest our research and development efforts, to gain the maximum return from our scientific experiments. And of course, when people think of, I'm taking beef as an example here, beef, of course, is, an elephant in the room, given that it does tend to produce very high levels of methane emissions. But going back to what I mentioned about uncertainties, when we report uncertainties, methane is, yes, it has very high impact. In one of the carbon footprints we did of beef production of grassland systems here in the southwest of England in the UK, we found that methane emissions from enteric fermentation, so essentially cows burping, account for about 50% of the total emissions coming from that system. The uncertainty from the lower end to the higher end, or confidence interval we call it, was about 3.6 kg CO2 equivalents. But a greenhouse gas that people are probably less familiar with, certainly in mainstream media, it gets a lot less attention, is nitrous oxide. And the production of nitrous oxide upstream from the farm using a process called the Haber-Bosch method, which requires a lot of energy to transform nitrogen into a fertilizer product, which can then be applied to soils, whether that's arable or grassland. In this case, it's grassland, it's a beef system. The uncertainty around the carbon footprint, whether we use a lower value or a higher value for nitrous oxide emissions, was quite a bit higher. So you can see it's 4.4 kg CO2 equivalents from the lower to the higher end, compared to 3.6 in methane. So whilst I'm not suggesting methane isn't important, of course it's very important, it's a powerful greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide is a much more potent greenhouse gas. And the uncertainty around nitrous oxide, given that it's very difficult to capture its spatial heterogeneity. The point here is that I guess we need to think more about where to invest research and development efforts. And just because methane gets a lot of attention in mainstream media doesn't necessarily mean that's where we should be investing our efforts. So just to talk a little bit about what we call functional units in life cycle assessment, I'm sure the majority of participants in this discussion are familiar with functional units, but just for those who might not be familiar with LCA jargon, a functional unit is essentially the denominator, or what we scale our emissions, whether that's water pollution, global warming potential, whatever. So in this case, again, I'm talking about beef because a lot of the work we do here at the Northwick site at Rothamsted is on beef and sheep production. We're looking at 1 kg of carcass weight. But when we want to compare products that might have a similar nutritional function, so let's take protein as an example. If we want to compare say soybean with beef, then we need to also consider the fact that the protein quality of that of those products will be very different. Not very different, they might be different. So soybean is probably not a great example because soybean is actually a very good quality protein, but wheat, you know, bread is often used as in certain parts of the world as a protein source. The protein quality of wheat is actually quite poor, and therefore we would argue that it shouldn't be compared on a mass by mass basis, and we instead need to think about the nutritional quality. So leading on from that, we were commissioned, when I say we, a huge group of global scientists, you know, from the LCA community were commissioned by the FAO just before Christmas of 2021, and we published not so much a guidebook, but a report on the rise of nutritional life cycle assessment and the opportunities and challenges that come with that. Now, I mentioned protein, but of course, protein is just one example. I mean, we eat food to source, you know, we need some amount of fats, we need more polyunsaturated fats than saturated fats, but we do need some saturated fats. We, of course, need water-soluble minerals and vitamins. We need carbohydrates for energy, and so on. So this publication, which again was commissioned by the FAO, and the DOI is available at the end for anybody that's interested. It sets up, I guess, not so much a methodological protocol, but it identifies the pitfalls, of which there are many, of using nutritional life cycle assessment. Moving on quickly, So our team, our life cycle assessment team, we have a very strong spatial group here at Northwick. So we do a lot of remote sensing, GIS work, geographical information systems. And what we're now starting to do is, instead of just looking at you know, a supply chain without any geographical context, we're now starting to think about, okay, how can we apply life cycle assessment to target optimal land use? So let's take across the UK, for example, if we're growing certain crops on soil types that are unsuitable for those soil types, what would the emissions be if we changed the crop to a soil type that was more suitable for that crop? And we can look at that across different commodities, and then the knock-on consequences that would have across the entire supply chain. So we published a paper earlier this year in the Journal of Environmental Management, where we did just that. And we took Hertfordshire as an example. Arable systems are very prevalent in Hertfordshire, but there's also a little bit of livestock production. So what we did was we focused on water quality at the catchment scale, and we applied life cycle assessment at each catchment, each major water catchment within Hertfordshire, and we applied interventions that could be, you know, adopted on farm, and we were then able to identify how much potentially, accounting for some uncertainties, how much potentially different regions of Hertfordshire could reduce their eutrophication and acidification potentials to water quality in, you know, using different interventions. We actually published, there was a mention, I think it might have been by Rick or Tarryn, about data availability. And of course, because we're publicly funded, we have a huge onus on data transparency. So all of our publications are open access. And what we're starting to do more and more of is publish our underlying data as well. So there's actually a complementary data set published of this, where we provide nearly 2,000 rows of data for every catchment with different interventions. We explain all the data, so we provide metadata. So if anybody's interested in that, I can share that as well. I think it's available on the GEMA article, which the DOI will direct people to. Just in case people think we focus just on you know, high-income countries or the UK specifically, we actually work with partners all across the globe. And earlier this year, we carried out a really interesting piece of work in Kenya, where a very talented PhD student named Phyllis Ndungu went and visited over 100 farms, over 300 farms, and created national country-specific emission factors for Kenya, which up until that point, they had been relying on tier 1 IPCC emission factors to estimate their emissions coming from, in this case, again, it's on African smallholders. So it would be a mix of some crop production, very few livestock, mainly dairy. The dung is not used very optimally. It's not used to fertilize the ground. Instead, they either leave it just to rot, or they might use it to fuel their houses. But there's such a wide variety, you can see, and a lot of the emissions associated with these systems are because the animals are not producing any product or produce for, you know, for the community, whether it's an economic product or a product for the household to consume themselves. So just some of the...
We're at 10 minutes past 11 now, so we have run over. I'm really, really sorry to interrupt you. I'm just wondering if we can wrap it up relatively quickly and maybe devote at least 5 minutes to see whether or not people have any questions, just in case people need to leave. We're down to 27 participants now, so I just want to make sure that we've given people the chance to speak if they have to. So I'm not quite sure if you had much more you needed to get through.
Literally my last slide, and I'll skip the achievements, so I'll just talk about some of our ongoing work.
We'll share all of these slides with everyone who registered anyway, so great.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I had to skip, I had to trim it quite a bit, so the narrative might have been a bit all over the place. But some of our ongoing works, which I think complements some of the previous talks, and we've got a DEFRA-funded project where we're looking at optimizing UK food supply chains under various new trading conditions. So post-Brexit, looking at how we looking at domestic versus importation. We've got a BBSRC funded project where we're aiming to target net zero mitigation and offsetting by creating a meta-analysis of existing data and identifying data gaps, going back to where we need to invest research and development efforts. We're providing consultancy services to companies to carry out life cycle assessments, which are scientifically robust. And we're following up with that FAO report I mentioned earlier, to rather than just focusing on the nutritional environmental nexus, we're now also looking at social issues such as animal welfare and fair trade. So I'll stop there.
That's wonderful, Graham. Thank you so much. And again, it doesn't really need to be restated, but the point is that this is all, on offer to basically to policymakers as well as to industry. And just a reminder about the fact that there is such a thing as best practice. So we encourage everybody to begin adopting it. I'm just wondering if anybody in the audience has any questions. And if you do, please just take yourself off mute and fire away. And if people are feeling a bit shy and no one's saying anything, just to start with, Julie, I'm just wondering what your response to the other panelists might be, and just how valuable you think some of their work could be in terms of the Food Data Transparency Partnership aspirations.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all my fellow panelists. A couple of things from me, and I think this applies across all the talks, and they've been very different, coming from different points of view. But first, I am reassured by my hypothesis that says there's a huge amount out there. There's a great amount of value and good things that we've been doing out there, and the thought that we can take that and build on it did ring through loud and clear. At the same time, the other half of that is a number of people talked about the challenges, the gaps, where it's clunky, where it's imperfect, and so I think those are the opportunities. I'm also reassured to hear about the importance that maybe an organisation like we can make in government is to the value of going after that consistency. So all the same things are being equivalents are being reported on, and consistency in ensuring everybody is a player. So those are my takeaways. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. I know we had some people on the call from the Clear Labelling campaign. I wonder if there's anyone who'd like to chime in on the importance of equivalence and mandated a mandated approach. Oh, and I can see, sorry, there's Paul Brereton, you've got your hand up. Would you like to chime in?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, it's very interesting. I was just wanted to highlight two things. So I'm at Queen's and we're involved in two activities which might be relevant, but one is looking at a BBSRC project, Sus Health, looking at combining sustainability with nutritive value and challenging stakeholders with a single lens, but clearly that doesn't encompass food safety. But also, just to let you know that we're also involved in a big 11 million euro EU project which is starting next week, and that's on food transparency. So I thought it might be interesting. I don't think it'll be as strategic as the things that Julie, you're looking at, but it's probably worth having a watching brief on what's being done there, because obviously it's quite a big resource. So
Yeah.
that was all. Thanks.
Yes,
you.
please. So point me at anything you've got. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, that would be great. Thank you so much for highlighting that. If you could email me with all the information we might need to stay on top of that, that would be great. And actually, if we could rely on you to keep us all informed, that would be really helpful. Thank you so much, Paul.
Okay.
Tarryn has to go. Thank you so much, Tarryn, for your time. We're really, really grateful. And Richard, Jordan, did you want to, you had a quick question, I think, for Graham.
Yes, thank you very much. Richard Jordan, Dean of UN NGOs for 40 years. Graham, question. Have you engaged a professional storyteller in order to make your slides come alive? Right now, they're two-dimensional, really lots of good information, but what's the story? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Richard, thank you. Let's take that into consideration next time, Graham, next time we're presenting. And was there anyone else? I can't see any other hands up. So was there anything anyone in the panel wanted to contribute before we wind up? We're down to 20 participants. Once again, so grateful to everybody who's managed to hang on for as long as this. No, great. Okay. Well, listen, I will thank everybody for your time, for your participation, for your support. We will be sharing all the slides, the recording of this meeting, all the information you need to sort of stay up to date with, you know, where we feel the direction of travel is in the relationship between food safety and wider sustainability impacts. Again, do reach out, do make use of us as a community in terms of supporting, you know, greater credibility in collecting sustainability data, measuring it and sharing it across your operations in an incredibly efficient fashion. And once again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We're really, really grateful.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.